Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us again for our next of our series of Sunday school lessons from St. Mary's. Now, you may remember that last time we finished up a series on a man named Joseph, and you may remember some of the details of that series of stories that we looked at. You may remember that one of the first things we looked at was Joseph and his really fancy coat, right? His coat of many colors, because Joseph was one of a family of 12 brothers, and their father loved him more than he loved all the others. And he favored him, which created some trouble between Joseph and his brothers. They were very jealous. And Joseph got the fancy coat, but they were so jealous that they decided to do violent things against him. So they made it possible. They sort of grabbed him and they made it possible for him to be sold into slavery in Egypt, to be taken away from his home. And you may remember we showed you a bit of the map about that last time. This area here, the yellow area, that's where his home was, just right there. But he was taken as a slave into a country, a very much larger country called Egypt. And that was in a time when you couldn't call someone or send them an email or get in the car and go somewhere. So it was like he didn't exist. His family didn't even know he existed. So bad things were happening, and things got worse there, because at one point he was put into prison. He was falsely accused. And yet Joseph refused to be bitter about that. He refused to give up. He continued to believe that God was going to be with him all the way through that, and God was with him. So eventually Joseph gets out of prison because he has a plan to help Pharaoh to be able to overcome what's going to be a really bad time for Egypt, a famine, bad weather, bad crops, not enough food, people are going to starve. So Joseph knows this is coming. God tells Joseph this is coming. And Joseph comes up with a plan that during the 7 good years that are in front of them, they would put some away each year, so that when the weather got bad and the famine came, they would actually have this extra stuff left over from the good years to be able to survive the bad years. And it worked enormously well, so much so that Joseph was put in charge. Pharaoh made him the second most important person in the kingdom. And eventually, through that story, you may remember last week we talked about this, that Joseph was actually able to save his family, to save his brothers from starvation as well. And we ended up last week with Joseph and his family. Oops, there we go. We ended up last week with Joseph and his family reunited. Joseph forgave his brothers, even though they had been so incredibly mean to him. And then after he forgave them, they came to live in Egypt, because Joseph was a really important person in Egypt, so it was a good place for them to be. Well, that's where the story finished last time. We wrapped up with the Joseph story then, but of course now we're going to pick up that story a bit later. In fact, maybe even hundreds of years later. And you can imagine, after hundreds of years, some things have happened. Joseph and his brothers, they've all died. And now we're many generations after the time of Joseph and his brothers. And of course, the other thing that happened is that Pharaoh that loved Joseph so much, the Pharaoh that Joseph helped, he also died as well. And there were new pharaohs, and they didn't remember the story of Joseph. And they didn't remember how much Joseph had helped Egypt before and helped the Egyptians before. They forgot all of that story. And in the meantime, what had happened is that Joseph's family grew and grew and grew. God blessed that family. It became very large and very prosperous. It thrived in Egypt. And so the Egyptians started to get worried about all these other people who were from away, who were living in their country, and who were so numerous. There were so many of them. And they were afraid that maybe what these people would do, Joseph's family, the Hebrews, what they would do is that they would plot to help Egypt's enemies. And so they would help Egypt's enemies conquer Egypt. And so, to avoid that, the Egyptians made Joseph's family, the Hebrews, into slaves. So it's kind of strange, isn't it? That Joseph was sold to be a slave in Egypt and then had become free through God's blessings. But when God continued to bless Joseph's family, then they were made slaves again. And life became incredibly hard for them. I don't know if we can all, any of us can imagine what it'd be like to be a slave. That is to say, someone owns us. They can tell us everything that they want us to do, and we have no choice. If we don't like it, we just have to put up with it. But not only that, but it was also an incredibly hard life as well. Their job was to make bricks. So that's what this picture is about. So you'll see some of the Hebrews here. You see an Egyptian here with a spear. A very harsh life. You actually see the images of the pyramids in the background, because the Egyptians had these incredible building programs. And so the Hebrews, Joseph's family, their job was to make bricks as part of this huge building program. But it still incredibly hard work for them to be doing. But that even wasn't the worst of it, because they continued to be blessed. God continued to bless them. They continued to thrive and be prosperous. They continued to grow in numbers. And Pharaoh and the Egyptians were so fearful about that, they actually came up with an even worse plan. And that worst plan was that they would prohibit the baby boys, the baby boys born to the Hebrew people, to live. He ordered that all the baby boys would be killed. And that's horrendous even to begin to imagine. But God is not a nice story. But God continued to be with them, and God continued to bless them. And they refused to kill the baby boys. And next week we're going to pick up our story with one particular baby boy that was saved from being killed, and how God helped that particular baby boy to help all of his people. We're going to pick up that story next week, but we're going to make a bit of a change here, because we're going to talk about something else. Now, I want to put this into context a little bit, because this weekend is the third Sunday in Lent. Next weekend is the fourth Sunday in Lent. And the fourth Sunday in Lent is traditionally called Mothering Sunday. So it's a day in which we remember mothers. So we think about, for example, all the different kinds of mothers that you may have. Some of the obvious ones are
your own mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother. Maybe you have a special aunt who helps take care of you, and you see her as a mother-like figure. Or maybe you have a family friend who does the same, and they sometimes do things that are very mothering for you too.
Yeah, and godmother. I mean,
and your godmother, yes, of course,
when you were baptized, then maybe you had a godmother and a godfather make promises for you. So your mom, your grandmom, great grandmom, your godmother, other kinds of folks who help nourish and nurture and encourage and help you to grow. Well, we also speak about the church as a kind of mother to us, because the church helps nourish us and helps us to grow, if not just physically, but also as children of God. And we also think about our Lord's mother, Jesus' mother, Mary, as a kind of mother. If Jesus is our brother, then Mary is in a way kind of a mother to us as well. So we remember all different kinds of mothers on Mothering Sunday, which is next week. But we want to talk about that a little bit today, because we want to invite you to do something. Because normally one of the things we do on Mothering Sunday is we share something called Simnel cake. So if people have given up some food for Lent, this is a bit of a sweet treat for them to enjoy on Mothering Sunday. And normally at St. Mary's we would give out some simnel cake, but because of the pandemic, because of COVID, we're not going to be able to do that this year. So we're going to send out to everybody a recipe for making their own simnel cake at home. And so we invite Janice is going to talk a little bit about that right now. She's going to show you some of the ingredients.
So it's all the standard stuff that you would probably put into any cake you make. There's butter, and there's flour, and there's flour.
There we go.
Eggs, of course.
There we go.
And sugar. Two types. There's white sugar and brown sugar in this one. And there's some agent that will help it rise. So this one is baking powder. And then you sort of season or flavor the cake with a series of dried fruits. So these are cranberries and apricots. Be careful, he'll eat one.
I'm going to right now.
And this is some mixed peel like you put in a fruit cake at Christmas. And then this is another, this is ginger, actually, candied ginger. He might eat one of those too, because he really likes them. And that gives it a nice gingery flavor. Now, if you don't like ginger, you could substitute raisins.
And you could give the ginger to me.
And you could take the ginger to him. And this is just some ground almonds, some nut, which gives it a nice flavor. And this is a little bit of orange liqueur, or you could use orange juice, and you soak all your fruits in that to get them soft before you put them in the cake.
There we go.
And put it over there.
Yeah.
And then there's something else that goes in this cake. When you make the cake, you put half the batter into your tin that you're using. And then you take this, which is marzipan or almond paste. So it's ground up almonds and water, and I think maybe a little bit of egg in it. And you thinly slice this and you lay it on the top. And this sort of melts through your cake when you cook it. You put the rest of the batter on the top, and it melts down through, and it gives it a nice almond flavor too. And by the magic of doing this online, I have some made. I didn't mix it up for you, but they're pretty straightforward. So you can see this. And then I'm going to make some frosting, just some simple white frosting. I'm going to put it on the cake and decorate them a little bit. Now this recipe, which you're going to be sent, has the option of making them little tiny like this in muffin tins, which is kind of nice too. I didn't make a big one this year because there wasn't going to be church where we could hand it out to people. So you might want to try this at home. Make one for those special mothers in your life. Now, if you don't have all these ingredients, and some of them may be hard to find, you can actually make it without the marzipan, if that's okay with you. You don't have to have that. You can just put all the batter in and bake it. Or you could just make a special cake for the people that you want to honor on Mothering Sunday. So, just a special recipe, maybe with something in it that they're really going to like. You can make a cake like that and decorate it, maybe put some flowers on it or different colored icing or something.
Absolutely.
So
remember that Mothering Sunday is a chance, like Mother's Day in May, it's a chance to remember and to show how grateful we are to all the many different kinds of mothers we have in our lives, including the church, right? So how the church nourishes us and helps us to grow as children of God. So we invite you to do that for next Sunday. I'm going to finish up this in just a second here. We invite you to do that for next Sunday so you can be ready for Mothering Sunday when that comes next week. Now, I'm just cutting this up because this was a picture that I showed you earlier about the life of God's people, the life of the Hebrews in Egypt as slaves, and we're going to send this out to you folks via email. It's a neat kind of thing because what I'm doing is I'm cutting this picture up and I'm going to give it to Janice because
seems like a test.
She's going to put the puzzle back together again. So we might not stick around to the end of that. It may take a little while, but Janice likes to work on puzzles.
I do like to work on puzzles.
Oh, there we go.
Oops.
I like to drop pieces of puzzle too. I'll get that in just a second. And let's go this way. There we go. So this one I'm going to send out. So this will be neat. You can cut this up or get someone to cut this up for you, and you can have your own puzzle to talk about what it was like for God's people as slaves in Egypt. But the neat thing about that story is that just like the story of Joseph, God doesn't leave his people as slaves. God is going to do something to help them be free from being slaves. And that's the story that we're going to pick up next week. But the neat thing about that story, about God rescuing his people from slavery in Egypt, just like God rescued Joseph from slavery in Egypt, is that that's also a story that reminds us about what Jesus does for us as well. So we'll talk about that too. There we go. And that picture, we'll have to find that other piece that fell on the floor. So she's more than halfway done, I think. So we hope to see you next week and enjoy some of the materials that we'll send out with the email. There are some really neat things, some picture things to work on, and some word games to work on as well. We'll send those out with the email link, and look forward to having you join us next week when we pick up with the story of God's people in Egypt. Thank you very much and have a great week. Bye now.
Bye, guys.